50 strangers dropped into a game where survival is the only rule. Among them, Jace Ryland, a mechanic with nothing left but hope for his dying daughter. But as alliances shatter and blood flows, he faces a choice: expose the truth to the world, or save the one life that matters most. Welcome to the Gauntlet, where every choice is a gamble, and survival is the prize. The shock of the cold water punched the breath from Jace Ryland's lungs. He blinked rapidly, his fingers gripping the edges of the bobbing raft as he pulled himself up, coughing seawater. Around him, 50 identical rafts drifted in a circle, like pieces of bait in a giant steel trap. The sea snatched endlessly in every direction but one, ahead, beyond the curtain of thick fog. Jagged cliffs rose like the teeth of some prehistoric beast. Jace, 32 years old, with grease-stained hands and exhaustion etched into the creases of his face, barely registered the breathtaking view. His thoughts were elsewhere, on a hospital room with 2 white walls, on the machine that beeped in a fragile rhythm, and on the 6-year-old girl lying still beneath a tangle of tubes. Ellie. She was why he was here. The mechanical world turned his gaze skyward. A massive drone hovered like an executioner's axe above him, sleek and black with blinking red lights. From hidden speakers came a thunderous voice, smooth and theatrical. Welcome, contestants, to the Gauntlet. Your goal is simple: survive and be the last one standing. Succeed, and you walk away with $1 million. Fail, and you become entertainment. Gasps rippled through the contestants. Some shouted in protest. Others, those who had come for the thrill or fame, grinned hungrily. Jace remained silent. He didn't need the money for fame, for revenge, or for escape. He needed it for Ellie's bone marrow transplant. Her time was running out, and so was his. This was a gamble. The last one. The rafts bumped against the rocky shore, releasing them one by one. Some contestants broke into a sprint the moment their feet hit sand, disappearing into the dense wall of green ahead. Others lingered, forming shaky alliances. Jace did neither. He moved quietly, head down, absorbing everything. The terrain, the placement of surveillance drones flitting the canopy, the way camera lenses embedded in bark glinted when the sun hit them just right. The island was no ordinary battleground. It was a carefully curated arena, an ecosystem of violence, spectacle, and control. The jungle swallowed them all. Caves dotted on the cliff sides, towers blinked like lighthouses on distant ridges. Signal flares hinted at nightly supply drops, each one a trap disguised as salvation. Jace didn't need to be the strongest. He needed to be the smartest. And he was. He found a ridge near a freshwater stream, put a false trail littered with misleading footprints, and laid tripwires between trees. In just 3 days, he captured 5 different contestants. Not to kill, but to disarm. He tied them, took their food, their maps, their weapons, and released them in other parts of the jungle. To the elites watching from plush lounges through private encrypted streams, he was a curiosity, efficient, clever, and disappointingly non-lethal. So they changed the rules. That night, the sky ripped open as metal paws shrieked to the dark, crashing into the trees. Each one carried a pinging device, small flashing trackers keyed to the injections placed under each contestant's skin upon arrival. The voice returned. No more hiding. It boomed. Let the hunt begin. Jace didn't flinch. He just reached for his wrench, exhaled slowly, and vanished into the shadows. The jungle had betrayed them. What once offered cover now pulsed with danger. Every tree held a camera, every gust of wind carried the buzz of surveillance. And now, every 30 minutes, a chime would ring through the island. Soft, artificial, and damning. A new rule. Pingers activated at timed intervals, broadcasting each contestant's locations, like flares in the dark. For the viewers, wealthy elites lounging in towers, casinos, and high-tech viewing suites, this was peak entertainment. They drank rare wines, shouted bets across virtual arenas, and laughed as names disappeared from the leaderboard. For the contestants, it was a death sentence. Jace Ryland had stopped sleeping. He moved camps twice daily, relying on instinct and mechanics' ingenuity to lay traps with what little material he could salvage. Tripwires disguised with moss, pitfalls covered with woven ferns. He didn't aim to kill, only delay, disarm, mislead. He would rig false trails using footprints carved into sandals. Sometimes he left scraps of food or a torn sleeve to lure the aggressive away from its real path. The others started talking about him, whispers as supply drops over intercepted radio fragments. The Phantom, the man who never killed, yet always had gear. They'd find the aftermath, empty camps, stripped packs, carefully removed weapons. Nothing else. No blood, no body. But legends couldn't shield him from the truth. Of the 5 contestants he spared in the first days, 3 were dead. Jace had heard the screams echo across the valley one night, carried by wind and horror. He buried his face into his forearm and stayed still in the underbrush as another pinger blinked out of existence. He told himself it wasn't his fault, but the guilt had weight. Worse still, a new threat had emerged. Rogan, a towering ex-soldier with hands like vices and a grin made out of scar tissue, had begun to dominate the island. Where Jace was subtle, Rogan was spectacle. He executed his targets with brutal efficiency, snapping limbs, crushing windpipes, taunting the drones. Each kill was a performance, delivered like a gladiator playing to a bloodthirsty crowd. Streams of his kills had the highest bets. Viewership surged when he appeared. And now, he was moving west, toward Jace. Jace didn't wait. He packed what little he had and fled north, toward the mountains where the jungle thinned and an old cell tower loomed like a skeletal finger against the sky. He wasn't running to survive anymore. He was running to end this. Hours earlier, inside a hollow tree he nearly missed, Jace had discovered a scrap of genius, an old transmitter schematic, slipped into a supply crate by someone who must have had doubts. It was enough. If he could reach the cell tower and wire into its dominant uplink, he could override the feeds, broadcast the truth, force the outside world to see what this really was. Murder disguised as sport. The climb would be brutal. Rogan wasn't far behind. And worst of all, that cursed ping would sound again in 27 minutes, announcing his location like a dinner bell. So Jace picked up his wrench, slung the schematic over his shoulder, and disappeared into the brush. There was no more hiding, only the gamble of a man with nothing left to lose. The mountain clawed at Jace Ryland with every step. Rain slicked the rocks, turning his ascent into a grueling crawl. Vines tangled around his legs, mud sucked at his boots. But he climbed, teeth clenched, muscles screaming. Behind him, the jungle darkened. Before him, the tower rose like a broken needle, piercing the clouds. Barbed wire crowned the outer fences, some sections torn away, others tangled with rust and faded blood. Automated sentries once protected this perimeter, but now their lenses were cracked, their bodies torn apart by vines and age. Downed drones lay like vultures with clipped wings, some sparking feebly in their final death throes. This wasn't just a relay hub, this was the control point, the beating heart of the Gauntlet. Jace slipped through a breach in the fence and spotted a hatch beneath the collapsed metal platform. He heaved it open, coughing against the moldy heavy air, and descended into the belly of the beast. Inside, the bunker was a shrine to surveillance. Dozens of screens lined the walls, live feeds from contestants' pingers, aerial drone views, biometric readouts, wires snaked across the floor like veins, pulsing with cold electricity. At the center stood a console, intact, glowing, humming with power. The uplink. Jace moved fast. He connected the schematic from the supply drop into the side terminal. The screen shuddered, lines of code spilling like rainfall. He began typing, rerouting encryption, overriding firewalls, punching in commands with trembling hands. If he could break the encryption, he could hijack the screen. One broadcast, one message, enough to expose the slaughter for what it was. He never heard the door open, only the low, mechanical whir of a drone behind him, and the scrape of steel. Jace turned. Rogan stepped into the light, blood drying on his forearms, eyes wild with triumph. The cameras overhead adjusted, hanging to frame the moment. They were the final 2. "You should have played to win," Rogan said, voice rough as gravel. He drew a blade streaked with dried crimson. "Now you're gonna die as a traitor." Jace backed up, eyes darting for cover. "You're just a puppet," he spat, "dancing for people who bet on her deaths." "And I danced better," Rogan growled, lunging forward. The bunker exploded into motion. Jace ducked behind the mainframe as a knife slashed through the air. Sparks flew as Rogan's blade bit into a monitor. Jace retaliated with a wrench, catching Rogan's forearm, but it was like hitting stone. Rogan slammed him into the console, cracking a screen. Jace tasted blood, his vision blurred, but he didn't stop. He lured Rogan toward the balcony, narrow, open, wind slicked. Each punch Jace took drove him closer to collapse. His ribs ached, his shoulder throbbed. Finally, Rogan tackled him to the floor, knife raised high. "This is the end," Rogan hissed. But Jace didn't freeze. With a roar, he twisted sideways, jammed his knee into Rogan's hip, and kicked upward with every ounce of strength he had left. Rogan staggered, lost balance, and tumbled over the railing. The sound of his body hitting steel echoed up the tower like a bell tolling the finale. Jace lay there, broken and gasping. He hadn't come to kill, but to survive. He had no choice. The bunker shook with the aftershocks of the fight. Dust rained from the ceiling, monitors flickered, and the stale air thrummed with alarm sirens that echoed like distant wails. Jace Ryland dragged himself back to the console, his body aching, shirt soaked with sweat and blood that wasn't entirely his. Then the system lit up. Final contestant, Jace Ryland. Prize incoming, $1 million. The announcement rang out through unseen speakers, smooth and celebratory, yet dripping with smug detachment. "Congratulations, Mr. Ryland. You are the winner of the Gauntlet. Extraction en route. Please remain visible for drone confirmation." Jace didn't move. He stared at the glowing words on the console. The cursor blinked beside the uplink code. Still live, still waiting. The firewall override held. One more keystroke, and it'll broadcast everything. The cameras, the kill streams, the deaths of 50 desperate souls sold to the highest bidder. The world would see the truth. They'd know what this game really was. He raised his hand to the keyboard, but paused. Ellie's face flashed through his mind like a strobe. Her small fingers clutching his in the hospital room. Her smile half formed through a plastic oxygen mask. The faint tremor in her voice when she asked if he'd be there for her birthday. He lied and said yes. She had believed him. Jace's breath caught. The money was real. He had seen the vault drops, watched others taken by Chopper after winning. $1 million. Enough to pay for a transplant, for recovery, for the years he still dreamed of giving her. He looked at the keyboard again. He could save lives, bring down the entire Six system, stop future games, be the whistleblower, the martyr, the man who ended the blood sport. Or he could save her. Jace's vision blurred. He gritted his teeth and wiped his eyes roughly. His knees ached as he stood, the cold concrete biting into his soles. The cursor blinked. He reached forward, hand hovering. Then he pulled it back. The room was silent now. No more alarms, just a dull hum of servers, still running, still feeding death to the world. The signal waited, but Jace no longer did. He turned his back to the console. Outside, the extraction drone buzzed into view, black, unmarked, and ascending like a judgment. Jace stepped out into the balcony, arms raised. The drone hovered close, scanning his biometrics, verifying his victory. As it extended its ladder down to him, Jace took one final look back toward the open bunker hatch. Inside, the signal still blinked, still ready, still unanswered. And with that, he climbed. The rotors thundered against the pale morning sky as the extraction chopper descended onto a hidden coastal helipad, kicking up dust and loose ash from the nearby cliffs. Jace Ryland stood motionless on the landing pad, his face smeared with dried sweat and bruises, his expression unreadable. The drone that had tracked him all night now hovered silently overhead, its red recording light finally flickering off as the chopper's door swung open. A masked handler stepped out, dressed in a black tactical uniform with no insignia. No greeting, no congratulations, just protocol. He handed Jace a duffel bag, heavy with weight that wasn't just monetary, and a sleek satellite phone. "This is your line to us," the man said. "You'll never speak of what happened, not to anyone. You won't need to. You have what you came for." Jace didn't respond. He climbed aboard the aircraft, slumped into the seat, and stared out the window as the island shrank into a speck behind them. The water beneath them looked still, serene. You never know it had been a killing field, a stage for death. He didn't flinch when the handler offered him water. He didn't speak during the fight. Not once. 3 months later, the money had worked miracles. Ellie lay asleep in a recovery bed, her chest rising and falling with ease for the first time in years. Her skin no longer carried the gray pallor of disease, and when she smiled, it reached her eyes. The doctors called her a miracle. Jace just nodded, thanked them, and quietly paid every cent owed. Their debts vanished, the hospitals, the late notices, the eviction threats. All gone. Jace bought a rundown auto shop in a quiet corner of the Midwest, somewhere without city cameras, without curious faces. He kept his name out of the papers. He worked with his hands again, replacing pistons, realigning engines, greasing gears. He liked the noise. It gave him something to drown the silence. But the silence never stayed away for long. At night, it crept back again. In the hours when Ellie slept peacefully down the hall, Jace sat in the garage, staring at the floor. He heard the screams, the ones that didn't come from the enemies, but from the innocent. He saw the faces of the 5 he spared, and the 3 who died anyway. He remembered Rogan's bloody grin, the weight of his dying body falling into darkness. He thought of the console, the blinking signal, the choice he didn't make. The game still went on, new contestants, new streams, new bets. Sometimes Jace would flip open the satellite phone and just look at it. The line was still live. They hadn't cut him off. They didn't need to, because they knew he wouldn't talk. Not really. He had gotten what he came for, but the cost never left him. And in the quiet, when the world outside was still, he often asked himself, was I the hero who saved my daughter, or just another killer who knew how to survive?